today we're going to talk about a lot of things, food related and sovereignty related and, parallel systems related, things that I think are of the utmost importance to all of us, whether we understand it or not. And we have the return of my brother, Chad Johnson. Chad is the heart and soul of our food forest at the farm in Lockhart. He's a regenerative expert. He is a Sepp Holzer understudy, and Sepp Holzer's work is something we dive deeply into, not just on this podcast, but what we're really going to dive deeply into in our 3 days together. We're meeting March 31st through April 2nd at the farm. I will have the link for the Eventbrite in the show notes, so just click it there if you guys want to come out for that event. We're going to deep dive a lot of the things that we're talking about here today on this podcast. And Chad's got some incredibly good ideas on how to really create aptitude within this field and specialization. So if there's something that you are really drawn towards a certain aspect in a particular style of farming or food management or food sovereignty, then you can specialize within the field and become really good at it. That might be you love working with an excavator and you're phenomenal at earthworks, at digging ponds. It could be a number of different things, but anywho, that's all side notes. As I was thinking of Sepp Holzer, really, he's on the Mount Rushmore. And the reason he's on the Mount Rushmore for this type of farming is because of the fact that he proved you could do it anywhere. He was a guy who dug ponds, natural ponds in the Saharan desert and created little oases there where he could grow damn near any food in the desert where you couldn't hold water. By restoring hydrological balance, he created the oasis. And at his farm in Austria, he's at 6,000 feet elevation. He's growing lemon trees outside. He's not using a greenhouse. He's doing bananas outside. He's doing a whole host of things that you think are absolutely impossible because he's able to create microclimates. And this is big because, it doesn't mean I can grow whatever I want, wherever I want, but it does allow for a greater degree of variety once I've cured the land and helped optimize different pockets of it to have different features. Some might be a little bit more subtropical. Some might be a little bit more desert-like. And figuring out how to work with that is everything Chad's teaching. So I am super pumped to have Chad on this podcast today. And I'm also really pumped to have you guys out and see what we're doing at our farm in Lockhart. Again, March 31st through April 2nd. Check out the Eventbrite in the show notes. We'll have information there and links to books and all sorts of other good stuff for you as usual, all in the show notes. Chad Johnson, welcome back to the podcast, brother.
Thanks. Kingsbury?
It's funny. Probably half these podcasts I don't ever mention the name until the intro, but I absolutely love your name. It's something that is it's got a ring to it, Chad Johnson. It's also like fairly, like Paul Bunyan. Like there's like an old-timey American to it, Chad Johnson. We've built such an amazing relationship in a very quick period of time, and I my thoughts on that are 100% directed by source, and I just appreciate the fuck out of that. These intros that I get, little God nods, anytime I get to meet a person such as yourself with not only your level of expertise, but your level of tapped inness. And I know we covered a lot on our first podcast. Today, really wanted to bring you back on to talk about the education that we're going to be running here, and how do we tap in? That's another thing, learning these things, but I want to recover some of your backstory because I think it's important. And, there's many paths up the mountain. I obviously talk a lot about the plant medicine path, and that's not for everybody. And then there's some things that just occur where it's almost unavoidable with your car accident and the unlocking that took place there and living in the redwoods and just awesome. So I want to retrace some of the steps. Talk about, some of the different pivotal moments in your life that really started to open you up and get you to see behind the lines and outside of the matrix, if you will.
Yeah, and I think as children, we all have this natural connection with nature, and we go through life finding our way. And what's interesting in these times is there's a lot of people all at once around the world reassessing how they want to live their lives. And it seems to bring them back to the land. But with the technologies we have now and the backstory of what's happened and the technologies that have come in, we can now reimagine and learn from what we've seen.
We're outside. It's a little bit windy, but keep going, brother.
Yeah. We're at a really interesting time in history. And what you guys have accomplished here in less than a year is just proof of what's possible. And you're using things like the technology of just a light electrical fence that can be moved. Biodynamics, like a seed planted 100 years ago. The animals, the water, you're kind of bringing all this together, and it's not your normal model. But what you do is when you create it, you can see the results of it. So for me, getting my hands back in the earth was a spiritual experience, like I was tripping in the redwoods. And that was the beginning. That's never left. And moving forward, I started creating with a shovel terraces, dug my first pond, I had animals going, I was doing annual, perennial. And then I opened up Sepp Holzer's book, and it was like an epiphany for me because I saw everything I was already doing, and he just advanced it quickly with 50 years of work. No one knew he was up there for a long time, especially in the US, that this guy had gone against all the norms and was working directly with nature. So you're not looking at one recipe, one model, and he created a thriving, productive ecosystem. So a lot of people will say, well, you begin by planting your trees. Well, you begin by marrying yourself with land because you want it to fit your, who is involved, what you can do, what are your strengths, and then you pair that, you marry it with the land. And so you look at the advantages and challenges of the land. And from there, you can kind of bring those together. It's pretty effortless when you start to see what you have to read in yourself and the landscape, and also redefining what is a farm or a ranch or how you're going to go about it, because you can bring in diversified incomes too. So you're looking at the animals, but in your case, you guys have a network of people where I see it as a mecca where people can come in and learn. And also just your story of coming in less than a year and creating what you've already created is just a testament to what's possible. You can come into it, it's almost better sometimes to come into it without the preconceptions. We've already got these fields going, we've got all the loans on the equipment that you might not even need, and it's harder to backtrack and say, well, we could have started with the land and done all this stuff, but we're already on this path.
Yeah. Yeah, speaking of that, that's a big one. I mean, I know this from shooting, a lot of the gun courses that I've been to with my buddy Tim Kennedy and all the SF guys that he works with at Sheepdog. The common thread is that women are often better students than men. And the reason for that is I've been shooting my whole life, or whatever their fucking story is, and their approach can be less student-like. So the beginner who's never shot before, that's eager to learn and understands they don't know what the fuck they're doing, they're so much easier to teach. And it's funny, I've never applied that to farming, but obviously it's the case here. Every person on the farm, other than my wife, did not grow up farming. Every single one of us. It's like our first rodeo. And but at the same time, all of us have a deep desire to learn this stuff and to embody it, to make it not just etheric knowledge, but actual wisdom grounded in the soil itself. And we've had those desires for a while, and obviously there's been a number of circumstances, which I'm sure we'll even touch on. We can touch on it in this podcast around world events that have led us to really light a fire under our ass and say, now is the time to do it. It's not 10 years from now. It's not 20 years from now. It's right now. But the student's approach, super important. And yeah, to your point, it's pretty remarkable to see, everything that's gone on here. And speaking of that, it's not like the tip of my hat to myself or any of that. It's a tip of the hat that we have access. And one of our goals through education here is to grant that access to the same people, right? Like I want you to learn from Tim Kennedy. Like go to fucking Sheepdog. I want you to learn from Chad Johnson. I want you to learn from Daniel Griffith. I want you to learn from the people that we've learned so much so quickly from, and have that information distilled in a way where you leave after a weekend and you've got a fucking plan. You know what to do. You know how to execute it. And you've had that plan verified and double checked by your peers and by the instructors that we hold so highly. And I'm stoked for it. And obviously, in literally less than a year, because we started in March, in less than a year, you can see what we've done here. It's pretty remarkable. When we have people out, it's going to be March 31st through April 2nd. So 3-day weekend. Well, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And it'll be, 13 months at that point. where you can see like literally going to tour the land. You're like, this is what we did in 13 months. And there were some pros to, obviously we went with the land. So we'll talk a little bit about that. What did the land offer us and how you work with that? That's going to change from person to person, from place to place. It's going to change based on what your goals are. It's going to change based on where your desire is. Like if I have no desire for animals and I'm vegan, I'm not going to bring in animals per se. I might try to figure out different ways to get compost and reusable amendments. Not as effective as plant and animal husbandry, but that might be my cup of tea, and there's no reason to force yourself to go the opposite of that. For us, we love animals. We want to regenerate the land as fast as possible. And that made the most sense, to be inclusive of all these different practices at once.
Yeah, and that's a really good point. You can have a backyard and you can create your own oasis. And maybe you're working from home or not, but you can fit it to your life. And there's a good chance that once you start creating it and you create it in the right way, it will gain its own momentum. And I think you've mentioned more than once the solution is baked in. And if you know these simple things to start with, then it just has a momentum of its own and it accelerates. The one thing where regenerative agriculture has come out, which is great, you can also overlay nature more. And you've done that in many different ways already here. So after 1 year, just with your animal husbandry, that's just one part, you're going to see a phenomenal response after year one, because you're taking large pieces of the land and you're regenerating it. And then you can also take your points of where you want to do something more intensive, whether it's production gardens or a food forest or where you're holding water, and you marry all those together and it becomes something greater than the parts.
Yeah, that's a massive piece that really drew me to you when we first talked. I got introduced to you from Jim Gale, and we spent 30 minutes on the phone, and it was like, done deal, this is our guy, let's get him out here. And then we got to spend 3 days together, where you really just came out and meditated in the land, you slept in the land, you were under the stars each night, and really tuned yourself in, as older, wiser people would do. That was a breath of fresh air to see your level of commitment into that practice, and then what you were drawing from that was coming through in your dreams. The vision of the spiral, the vision of how our food forest would come together, and obviously built off the back of your understanding from having hands in the soil for so long and what you learned from Sepp Holzer. One of the things that I joked about with the team here, when we talk about hydrological balance and the importance of water, and everything we're discussing today is what we're going to be covering, and then some. Obviously, we don't get to everything we're going to cover in the 3 days together in a 1 hour and a half podcast, but a lot of these topics are going to go have a deep dive. Hydrological balance and the restoration of water in a landscape. And, we did all this stuff first. Then I started getting into Holzer's work to try to figure out what we had done. You had explained it to me, and I just wanted to know more. And I read Desert or Paradise first, which is a fantastic book explaining, where the world's headed or what we can do to change it. And then Permaculture second. The thing that blew me away in Permaculture, I remember calling you and telling you this, was like, half the fucking book is on water. Chapter 2, Hydrological Balance, is 82 pages. It's just over half the 160-page book. And it's all on water. And that's how important it is, obviously. We were very blessed to have a few natural ponds already here and the ability to tap into that and create, we're still working on that. That'll be something that's ever present, where we continue to fine tune and make that an important piece of it. It's the most important piece of it. That's why it's literally half the book.
Yeah, it's true, because like this class, you'll be able to take the elements of things like water into your design, and you'll know the starting points, but marrying it with that dream, to learn the simple things of dreaming the landscape. You don't have to have huge epiphanies. You can soak in your landscape and what your dream and vision is, and then you bring those together. And water is like a backbone as far as the life or the blood of the earth. When we think of our blood going from micro vessels to the heart, it's the same with the earth receiving it from the mountaintops to the ridges and all the way down into rivulets and back to the ocean of the heart. So the significance of blood is huge, or water. We're breathing in this atmosphere, we take it in, and it becomes part of our body, part of our blood. And you can feel that in the landscape as you soak in you're actually becoming more a part of it, and it's giving you more inspiration. And it's a beautiful feedback loop. And so reading nature, listening to it, and then working with it. It's you're going back to those elements because those are the building blocks. And when you start to see that and start to do these practices and you immerse yourself like you have here, then you start to see it and it starts to open up. And it's not the same everywhere, but it is the same elements. And you're still looking at harvesting, the water, the sunlight, and when you do it in like a perennial landscape or earth forms, then you're doing it on all aspects, north, south, and you're harvesting water and sunlight 3-dimensionally. So you start to see that canopy go up, you start to see the nature move in, and that has that trophic cascade.
That's such a big piece that really was one of the draws to me in learning from you was this idea, and it shows in your own farm and the different places that you've been, but when you're creating something of this nature, it's not just a food forest where now I've got 400 fruit and nut trees and that'll feed my family and generations to come, and extras is going to go to the locals farmers market and blah, blah, like it's that. And it's also increasing the biodiversity of the land. It's holding more water in and of itself, and it's creating its own microclimate and own ecosystem. And the ecosystem that already exists there is now enhanced by having this addition to it, right? The whole is left greater than when it started. And that's such a massive piece, because we often think like, we're going to tinker, we're going to do this. Big conversation we had when we got this land is 118 acres. Having seen the biggest little farm, knowing they were doing that on 200 acres, like, if we burnt the whole thing down, minus the houses, we might have 100 acres to work with. That's half of what they were doing, And ultimately, that wasn't the goal. And in listening to the land, it wasn't my desire to ruin so much to recreate, right? How do we work with what we have to enhance what's already here and then still have enough for us? And then actually flowed well into our story of wanting to create something that was more feasible for people with any size land, right? It's like, oh, sure, you got 100 people right now listening. You got 118 acres. I have one. I have a 1/10 of an acre in Austin, right? What can I do on a 1/10 of an acre? What can I do on my 3 acres in Spicewood? A lot. You can do a shit ton. Like our 400 fruit and nut trees, that whole spiral food forest is done on under 4 acres. And that was done on purpose that way to show you what you can accomplish. And 36 hens roam through there. We've got emus, we've got donkeys. We have a nice contribution of the animals keeping the insects down and shitting everywhere and making it viable. That just perpetuates itself alongside with, any trees that we want to take out to thin out and open up the savanna and open up the prairie rather. That gets sent through the wood chipper, and we have these perfect little cubes now. It's a badass wood chipper that runs in the back of the tractor. And just, I don't know if they brought you out there to show you what it looks.
It's really a mobile wood chipper with that tractor. That's beautiful.
Yeah, and it just puts the tiniest, like almost like wood pellets, right? That just go right back in and feed the soil. So there's little things like that where you're like, yeah, man, you can do a lot with very little space. And maybe if you didn't have as big of a space, you wouldn't be running the amount of animals that we have, but you could for damn sure still figure out which animals are you going to have, which are going to have the greatest impact, which are going to lead the least amount of inputs. And all that starts to flow in what you've taught us and what we're creating here.
Yeah, like you said, the size is scalable. So whatever you have, I know there's a family in California with a 1/10 of an acre in town, and last I heard they were producing 30,000 pounds of food a year. Damn. And they had different businesses on it. They had, I think it was goats and ducks and chickens and just growing vertically in a 1/10 of an acre. And so you can do it more.
Like 10 stories high. Like, how vertical is it to get that kind of production? That's pretty insane.
Yeah, and it's just growing more vertically things that would be more vertical because they were limited by space.
Mm-hmm.
But then you're also creating that canopy, which cools down the earth, which holds the water more. Yeah,
it creates different microclimates. There's different things, like that's one of the things I remember talking to Shervin and, his cousin David Avocado Wolf about their permaculture farm out in Kauai. and how, things are planted, what seems like random, but that's because there are vertical systems in place. And cacao and coffee and different things like to be in the shade. Certain shade-grown elements want that, so you got those really partnered next to these bigger trees within their canopy. That makes a lot of sense to me, and it's a cool way to stack on top of something where you would think you have very little. Now you can create even more use and harmony between these different plant relationships.
Yeah, some of these things are very simple. It's like you're mimicking nature, but then you can put everything together and it outperforms nature. And then it draws in nature, especially when you're holding that water, because that water is life. It's not just for the soil, it's for all living creatures, pollinators, what you guys have with the axis deer and the other deer and the sheep. You're getting the diversity of different manures, like with the cows and everything. And to put that together in a system wisely, to a certain degree, you could walk away when your water management is set up, because nature's going to fill in that gap. Your trees are going to be getting natural irrigation as they grow up because the leaves are falling. And you get into these woody areas where it's more fungal. And then you have the different soils there. You have the different soils in like the prairie. And so when you start to read that and bring all that together, it opens up your practice. And it's the very foundational stuff you want to start with, that water, that allows you to see what's happening on the larger landscape.
Yeah, and even like the tiniest thing. I remember when we were going for one of our walks, we saw a turtle, and this was late February, early March, way away from any pond. We've got a few of them here already, but like I don't know if she was trekking to lay some eggs or something, but it was kind of out in the middle of nowhere on our walk. And that's exactly the thing that you were speaking to as you started to create these different habitats within your own farm. That started to draw in all different types of species of plant, all different types of species of animal and bird. And it's a visceral thing when you're like, shit, where'd this be? You look up the bird and it's like, that's a fucking bird from like a whole different continent. It's of something that's never been around here before, right? And it's drawn. There's something that's drawing it towards us because it recognizes a certain attunement, a certain energetic field where it knows this is a home. It's a potential home for it.
Right. There's that connection in nature where you create the habitat and nature fills it in. And it's a natural process you can see happening. And when I first hand dug my first pond, the next day I had a turtle come cruising in and frogs, and there's no nearby water source. And it was just like, that was the epiphany right there of like, it will automatically start to fill in. And if you are planting out wild rice and maybe you want to eat duck, you already have the rice going where you can then say, well, are we having duck tonight? Or are we having lamb? You have these options of food security that's built on, and you have a diversity of things you can draw on, which is huge. That's part of the resilience.
Yeah, the diversity is resilience, and not just in some new age woke kind of way, but it truly is. It's one of the things that allows for things to do really well here. We've learned many lessons, in the first year, and have had fucking many hiccups from 13 sheep getting killed on 2 different nights, from coyotes not being watched, different things like that it's as real as it gets. Consequences are devastating, and we've had a lot of empress trees, which we absolutely love, and it's something that you turned us on to. And they're spread out, and then there's some more empress trees that are kind of within the food forest and some of the other trees, and all the empress trees that were, in the sea of other trees did just fine. And then a lot of the empress trees that were kind of out on their lonesome did not do as well, right? So it's an interesting thing. You put a human on an island versus in a community, it's a different setting, right? And there is strength in numbers, there is strength in diversity, but we could witness that in real time here. You're like, oh shit, is it a difference in the soil? Is it probably because it's not next to any other trees, so it can get singled out,
Yeah, and those are the important lessons. There's no failures, because like Sepp would say, you want the strong to survive. And if something doesn't make it, you don't want to baby it. But it's something to learn from. And so you gain that knowledge, And that starts to expand. And then you'll be like, well, those didn't make it. Those did. That's that response loop. Sometimes you're seeing a response loop within a day or a season. But that response and that knowledge that you start to gain builds. And that's where being the practitioner of the basic elements is what we'll be doing in that class. And you go through how you can systematically build that. There's a scale of impermanence, but I'm also overlaying SEP stuff with biodynamics, biochar, and all these things where I've had positive results from that can be applied to any landscape or backyard.
Yeah, that's a big one. A lot of people who kind of run these cookie cutter companies about for the right reasons, like food security and understanding kind of the nature of what's happening in the world right now, which I can at least bullet point for people. Over 20 food and meat processing plants have gone up in flames in the last 18 months. Over 20 in North America. What they'll usually say in the tagline, because it's not well covered by the media, is all previous fires at a location like this were labeled arson, right? They were always set on fire. It wasn't a fucking accident. And no one's drawing the conclusion that there is something fucking burning down our meat and food processing places. It's happened in Texas. It's happened all the way up in Canada, down in Mexico, all over North America. These things are gone up in flames, and likely by design. And I don't, you could read into that whatever you want to read into that. I don't know the fucking answer. I'd be lying if I said I did. But it is curious, right? We got the egg shortage. We got a lot of things, Meanwhile, Bill Gates owns the most farmland and is creating fucking soy eggs or whatever cholesterol-free nonsense he wants to create, which will not even match a quarter of the power and majesty of nature's egg. Right? An egg from a duck, a chicken, a quail, you name it. It's still the way nature wrapped it, right? It's perfect in its presentation and what it offers us. But just seeing these things kind of start to unfold, with the egg issues and different things like that. We know that a plan from World Economic Forum is to get people to eat crickets and bugs and to come off meat, as if that's going to somehow change the carbon output from vehicles and redirect, the earth setting itself on fire. That's a whole other podcast that we could fucking rabbit hole on. But even if we are climate minded and we want to make sure that we do our part, regenerative agriculture does the part, right? By regenerating the soil, that sequesters carbon. This has been proven many times over. The Soil Will Save Us, excellent book. I'll link to that in the show notes. Sacred Cow, documentary and book. Diane Rodgers, Robb. Robb Wolf's been on the podcast many times. It all documents this. It's not, and whatever people in power would fucking understand that if they just look at actual science and understand how the earth works. So to me, even though I don't believe there's some evil guy twisting his mustache at the top, it would seem that there's a plan to kind of move people away from these things, and maybe that's to consolidate power. Maybe it's for a one world government. Who knows? But it's not a plan that's with our best interest in mind. Right. And we're already starting to see the trickle down effect of what that actually means in the real world. What it actually means is you might not be able to get good quality eggs unless you go to your farmer's market or your friend who grows chickens, right? Who has their own supply. Chicken prices, maybe $30 a fucking pound for chicken breast within the next 10 years. Right. We may come to these points in time where it's like, man, the game changed. Why didn't I do something about it? And it's not to say that all of us, light the fire under your ass like it did for me to start my own food production, but at least to have a hand in it, to make your way out, go to the farmer's markets and see who's doing it the best and be like, dude, I'd love to come out and see your farm, volunteer, do whatever I can. We got lots of people volunteer here just to get their hands dirty and to see how it's done. And then educational courses like the one we're running, take it a step further. Where now if you are stuck in a suburb, like my wife and I are in a suburb house right now on 1/10 of an acre, I'm getting all sorts of ideas about what to do with that backyard, right? Like, how can I get the most out of this tiny little footprint and not waste water on a fucking lawn, which is, another environmental issue if we want to be serious about it. Like, lawns are a fucking joke, dude. So there's many ways in which we can start, and this, for the long part, as I talk about some of the things that may be considered dark, and this isn't new information. Like, Sepp Holzer in Permaculture talks about this. He wrote, a book 12, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, some of his books. And he's talking about the policy holders in the EU, what they're creating will lead to massive food shortages and eventually, what's the word? Famine. eventually famine. Right? I mean, that's what he's showing. Is like if the things continue at the rate that they're headed towards with the just policy alone, this is what it looks like downstream. My encouragement to everybody is don't wait till it gets that far. Right? Have your ducks in a row. It helps me as a dad to sleep better at night, knowing that I've done whatever I possibly can to prepare. And in doing so, even if the world ends up being a fucking really cool walk in the park, a technological utopia, I've still created amazing food. I've still healed the soil. I've still done it on whatever pocket, however size, small or large my canvas is to paint on. I've made the most out of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting that when you prepare for like seeing these systems and how they're going, is that when you prepare for that, you can create your own paradise. And what looks like total destruction in the outer world, when you look at financially,
educationally,
environmentally, yeah, and you can see where you can read nature where what happens with an earthquake. Well, there's an epicenter and then other things happen out from it. And we didn't see that in Turkey. There wasn't an epicenter. The second one was bigger. They flew ambassadors from 10 different countries out 24 hours before. And because they weren't playing the game.
Yeah.
But I see the total destruction as the opportunity for creation and for the impetus of people to see what's going on in their world, because we see what's being revealed now is there are different things at play. Dr. Andrew Hoff, who studied under the best of biosecurity for our country, went through and they systematically mapped it out and what it would look like and how they'd have to protect everything. Well, both copies of his work got stolen. And he said what he sees happening, because the propane creating the fertilizers and the different systems that are being taken out on different levels, he said there is a strong correlation that is happening right now, that it's moving in that direction. And maybe the outcome is that we're recreating this system. Because what looks like total destruction, even if we're doing earthworks, it'll look like total destruction, but the result on the other side, when you see what comes out, could be something greater than before it happened. And it wouldn't have happened if it didn't transform.
Yeah, and push didn't come to shove.
Sepp actually saw the U.S. as the place where things would happen. And when we did our trip overseas, he largely focused on the U.S. has to push back on the bureaucrats, because in my view, I've been all over the world, and you're not the most free country on your land. And that the U.S. was the leader, the first place where they gave the rights and the freedoms and the creation of the people, the powers, back to the people. And it wasn't from government, king, and emperor. It was given, these rights are given to you from God. And that's been slowly taken away. Whether you say, yeah, the U.S. is a captured operation, look at all these systems, it's being destroyed, but in a way, now that gives a chance for recreating it. And the more people that wake up to that, it's happening already. You can't unsee it after you've seen it.
Yeah, this I had Michael Mead on the podcast, who's just phenomenal and incredibly poetic, author of, I think, over 20 different books. And one of the books that really resonated with me and why I wanted to have him on was a book he wrote in 2012 called Why the World Doesn't End. You know, and it's this cracked open cosmic egg as the sun set. And I was like, somebody gave me this right as I was fucking in holy shit mode, red pill and everything in 2020 and 2021. And I read it, and he talked about, you know, the mythology of this is that the world on some level, if you think of a yin-yang symbol spinning, the world on some level is always under some level of destruction. And that's always freeing up and clearing more space for new creation, new shift. So it's always destroying itself and always recreating itself. We're both familiar with the fourth turning. So these cycles come like spring, summer, fall, and winter. They're about 20 years apiece. And right now, you know, they predicted this in the 1990s, that in 2005, give or take 3 years, we would start our winter. It's going to last 20, 21 years. 2007 happens, financial, 2008, housing, and bang, we're in it. And we're in it until 2028, give or take a couple years, right? So really understanding that it's a good idea. It's a really good idea to at least know where your food comes from, right? And to build one-on-one relationships where you can, if I can text my milk lady, who's 90 minutes away, it's a hike, but I can go pick up raw milk from her from A2 Jersey cows in bulk and have it good for 2 weeks, right? I can make a quick trip out there and grab what I need, the best cheeses, the best milk, and it's all fucking affordable because I'm going direct. So there's little things like that where I think, like, and this is the way we reseed community. I had a great conversation with Daniel Griffith about this. We know that the cracks in the systems are too big to not notice, right? We know this from finance. We know this from a whole bunch of things, medicine. Does the whole thing collapse and then need to be birthed from the beginning at that point? Or do we already have some parallel systems that are going in place that can replace that can replace the system as it smashes? And that's what we're working on. That's what we're working on with our food, our education. That's what we're working on with our health. That's what we're working on a lot of things here. So I think it's really cool that this is such a cornerstone piece of the conversation, as it should be. Water and food, you can't go very long without. I mean, air might be the only thing that takes a higher priority than water and food when we talk about these things. And Sepp knew exactly what fucking time it was. He wasn't a conspiracy theorist. He wasn't beating the drum on anything crazy. He was just saying that when you attend these summits, when you talk to politicians, when you see the legislature and what they're putting into pass as law, it's fucking disturbing. There was 2 times during the Obama administration, each term, they tried to make it illegal to grow your own food in the United States of America. That is bizarro world. I don't want to live in a world where I'm not allowed to grow my own food. That's just fucking crazy. Even when I was a California gardener, I wanted to grow my own food. Nothing was better than having my own plums, my own avocados, my own oranges. It's a big deal. So, and that of course is so big agriculture can now control what goes into your body and profit 100% of that, right? There's no profit if you have your own food. So we've rabbit holed a little bit of that, but again, circling back to the light side of things, we have the power. And what Sepp proved was that you could grow anywhere. That's the beauty of desert or paradise. Was he went into the Saharan desert. He went to these places, and even what's the name of his spot in Austria?
The Krometerhof.
The Krometerhof,
he gave to his son, and then he just started the Holzerhof.
Cool. Yeah, talk about what he's grown in these places. Talk about what he was able to accomplish there, because a lot of people will say, well, grow zones change things. And yes, that's true. Yeah, you got to lean into that initially. But over time, it doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah, he was a master of microclimates and reading nature like no one else. And to take that farm and suddenly have rare birds he's keeping, python, because that was one of his fears. So he's like, I'm going to bring a python and it's going to protect the greenhouse. American buffalo, water buffalo, the list goes on and on. Over 30
lemon
different
trees
kinds of
outside at 6,000 feet elevation.
Yeah, banana trees. So he'll have Arctic plants next to tropical in Austria. And yeah, over 30 different kinds of fish, over 30 different kinds of mushroom, 70 ponds, 70 some on the Krometerhof. And it's just that his epiphany with water was unbelievable, and it's so pivotal. And when you practice it yourself, you realize he's not gifted. He just communed with nature and worked with it, got the response, and then out of decades of all that work, he's like, and here it is.
There's the masterpiece.
And people in the U.S., people here weren't ready for that. The permaculture world didn't see Sepp Holzer till not long ago. His first U.S. installation was 2012, and for a lot of those people there, anyone that had him on their radar was there. We had like 100 people, and the epiphanies were clicking long beyond the class time. It was just as rich because all these passionate people and really experienced people came together, and we had conversations into the moonlight as we're walking around these new water features and landscape. And if you haven't walked and experienced one of these systems, it's hard to imagine. But you're starting from the premise of what is paradise or what is your dream. And you think of water, you think of flowers, you think of the birds, the bees, animals, and you're bringing it together in a pretty simple way. But it's just not practiced. and we can take what ancient cultures did and took generations to do, now we can do in days. And so suddenly the quick solutions are at our fingertips, along with things, the appropriate technology of setting up the landscape with heavy equipment, or the light electrical fencing where you can just move your paddocks. It's kind of baked into the cake.
Yeah, the super important, the ability there. I remember first diving into Sep's work, and you had already explained this to me, but how a lot of people in the permaculture game were like, if it can't be done with hand tools, don't do it. And he's like, fuck all that. You can't fix what we've done to the earth with a spade. Utilize the best of modern technology to aid in that, and at least in the setting up of everything, and then watch it take off from there, right? And I love that. We've done a lot of that. We learned about this mobile moving of fences from Dion, where he's a South African rancher, where we got our cattle from. And we'll talk about more of those choices and the why in our education, but just a brilliant guy, one of the best ranchers in the world, and understood, he lives in South Texas, what would be the most harmoniously tuned to this land. And he selected these guys from South Spain. And moving this, unless you want to have permanent fence, which costs a lot of fucking money, just for our high fence was $150,000, just to have the high fence set up so the deer can't leave. But interiorly, if you got fence all the time, that's aesthetically not pleasing to me. It doesn't allow for these beautiful walks where you can journey wherever, even if they're not turned on. You've still got something in your way. You got to hop, electrical wire to get around. I wanted as minimum as possible, where we could set up something the boys could get the cattle moved, and the next paddock would be ready for them, and then they could move that, and they'd have the next 2 paddocks ready for them, right? 3 paddocks at once, and it'd take up a smaller footprint, right? So really cool things like that. Now we can systematically rotational graze as herds used to be through predator prey. All the herd animals used to get shoulder to shoulder. They used to buckle up, and the stragglers were the ones that got fucking eaten, right? They didn't exist anymore. So through that's where the greatest amount of animal impact can take place on the soil, because now they're huddled together. If it's a flock of sheep and a herd of cattle like we have, a flurd as Daniel calls it, now we got the mix of the microbiome of the poop and the pee that's going back in, but still the power of the hoof of the cow stomping it back in and creating these little divots in pockets where even if they're not stepping in their own poop and pee, they're creating little sponges, right, where the water can hold a little differently and slow things down. And as they're eating some of the different hays that we're feeding them, they're eating the seeds, the ruminants not hurting the seeds, and when they shit that out, they've effectively planted next year's grass, right? And it just comes back thicker and thicker and thicker.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you'll see a dramatic increase with that. Animals in the land is really important for these larger landscapes, because you're going to see each paddock, especially like I said, next year, you're going to see all that ramp up. And then as that soil becomes more living, it has a greater capacity to hold the water, which in turn cycles and becomes more life. It's very possible. And I think a lot of people feel like, I'll never figure this out. But it's really just knowing these basic elements, bringing them together, and realizing you can create your own healing food, medicine, and whatever. Mushrooms, if you want mushrooms, the potential or what's possible, I don't think people know. And that's I love how you're bringing all that here. So I said I see this as a mecca, because the demand or the wanting to know this and feeling like you can't tap in may seem overwhelming, but like this 3-day class will give you the basic pieces to develop your farm, your dream, and then you create your income streams. And it can be things where you bring in people for education. It can be many things. So you diversify all your income flows. And then the diversity, whether it's in food or income streams, it may be up. Like, let's say you have a huge flush of mushrooms and then you're preserving those, or you're selling them like Sep. Sep was he was known as, in the 80s and on until Chernobyl, as the Paul Stamets of Europe. So he was growing them, but you know how fast mushrooms go through organic matter. He was taking the mycelium into 5-gallon buckets. He'll do 1,000 of those and sell them, and then the next year he might do something totally different.
He was a master of see a need, fill a need, right? And one of the principles that I love drawing from him was, talk to your local restaurants, talk to people. And we were doing right when you were in town, eating out, and then Lockhart, finding all the cool places to go, and really having deeper conversations with their chefs, seeing what they wanted. What would you pay a high dollar amount for? Oh, if you could get us Blue Lotus, if you could get us crawfish, if you could get us, X, Y, and Z and have it right here, locally grown in town, like that's a selling point for a lot of really high-end restaurants. And then it's not, you're caught up in the how many potatoes can I grow each year game, right? Get out of that game. That's not the game. I mean, grow them if you want them, but don't. You wouldn't use a land this small to try to emphasize one crop. That's not smart. But I love that Sepp was really thinking to that, like, where is the need? What is the thing that I can do on the spot that I can do it in, and how can I provide that for people that's going to have some really good payback?
Right. And it's beyond organic, because the way you're doing it, you're creating a higher quality, and you're not going for that production. And so suddenly your food becomes more nutrient dense. It's mineralized. A lot of the things we don't see in the food that we're taking in, and some which aren't even foods. He would market that it's kind of beyond organic. He wasn't doing biodynamics, but biodynamics brings that up another level. So you're bringing in all these things, and he would get very high prices because he has high quality over the production. Even though he had plenty of production, you have that high quality. And so one of his models, which is brilliant, besides like the education piece, or even people that would stay in one of his 12 little chateaus on the land, they would either rent it out or they would be helping develop the farm and learning at the same time. People would come and harvest for him. So suddenly he's not having to harvest because people are coming on a certain day, they're picking whatever they want, and then they pay for it and they leave, and he's not even having to bring it to market. The people would come, even companies would come and pick his special pears for schnapps, and schnapps is another world there. It's like, this is schnapps. Oh. But they would come and pick it and pay a premium price. And so he kind of broke the mold on that model of what's possible, because nobody around him was doing what he did. And if they did, he would just change what he did. He says, if your neighbor starts doing what you're doing, you can do something totally different, whether it's animals, plants, or anything else. And that's one of the strengths, especially when you're doing something nobody else is doing, and the word of mouth starts to spread, and it's usually like wildfire because you're not doing what everyone else is doing. And even fish, he would, with the Holter monk, he'd lower the monk, harvest the fish. They would go in aquariums that the restaurant would pull up with their aquariums, and they'd bring live fish to the restaurant. So the people in the restaurant are seeing these aquariums with the fish, and they're also bringing the fish on the plates with the gourmet meal. And yeah, it's beautiful. And you're well sank into your community.
Yeah, that's one of the things I wanted to bring up, was how beautiful that is. I think he dives into it in permaculture, but this idea that you're inviting people out to your land, they're going to pick their own food. They're going to, there's a scale at the end of it with a register at the end of their walk. It's all one way as they snake their way through this beautiful market garden that you've set up for them. And kids love that shit too. It's like literally like, oh, I get to pull potatoes, I get to pull carrots, I get to see exactly where my food's coming from, and we'll rinse it later, but we're just going to have the dirt and the soil of the land that we're taking it from, and it's in the community, it's right down the street, and we get to be a part of that, the harvest. That's a really cool feeling. And it also saves the farmer a great deal of work. And it allows more community building to take place, because now people have a vested interest in seeing you succeed, because they're a part of your process. They're a part of your land.
Yeah, like a community of plants. It's a community of people. You see, like, there's a lot of relations where you can see the earth body relating to our body, not just water. And you can see, like, I'll meet people and I'll be like, that, like Sepp, I'd be like, he's kind of like a wild rose. He's giving this fragrance, and you're just like, oh my gosh. And then he also has a personality that you would think of him as like a thorny rose. He's like very direct, like, no. And
he's talking about the EU for sure. He's got thorns, as he should.
Yeah, and he battled that for decades, and now the government works with him. So, he's definitely a pioneer in many ways.
Well, let's talk. I mean, we've spent a great deal of time talking about Sepp, as we should. If we think of the Mount Rushmore of people that have taken the best of what was understood and then made it their own, and really brought this movement of food on. Not just food for the sake of food, but food for all the things, right? Like as we create this food for ourselves, we're creating better food for everything around it, for the birds, for the soil, for the microorganisms, and it ripples out. It ripples out in all directions. He's on the Mount Rushmore for that, in my opinion. You'd have to say Steiner was, who wasn't really known for it until late in his career, when he had this following of many farmers that were into him from his days in Theosophy and then to Anthroposophy as he created it. And they knew that this would apply somehow to their farming techniques. And these were all organic farmers and regenerative farmers, and predating those words, that's what they were doing. But they also understood Steiner's medicine applied specifically to what they were doing and demanded it from him until, late in his life, he was able to create this entire field that's been used for the last 100 years called biodynamics.
Yeah, and it's beautiful how you're bringing a lot of the Mount Rushmore here, so that, foundationally folks can come here and learn, and they can take the best of the best. And that's what's beautiful, because it's going to open a lot of people's eyes. You get results right away. So you can see what's possible by walking the system, and then when it's explained to you, you can have more epiphanies for your land or your situation or what you might want to do, even just looking for land. And we'll go through that in the class of when you assess what kind of property you want, well, what are your strengths? What's your vision or your dream? And then you might be like, actually, that swamp has that's probably the lowest priced land because it has that swamp on it. But then you look at the swamp and you're like, that has super nutrient dense. It also can become a water feature. You can put fish, other aquaculture, edible plants, because aquaculture typically outperforms terrestrial by 3 to 4 times and takes less maintenance. You just design it, and that's what we'll go through in our water features. You have deep zones, you have shallower zones for spawning, but that temperature regulation can happen. The spawning you're putting in, whether it's stumps, logs, and sticks, it's getaways for the little spawns, so they can get away. They can start to become more resilient because they're like, I don't want to get eaten. And so it strengthens that. There's that tension in nature where the predator and prey, actually, they strengthen both. And you set up that system so you're creating that.
Yeah, absolutely love that. And I'm still, I'd be, again, I'm a rookie in all these things and quite green, in every sense of that word. But it has been amazing, getting to hang with you and learn from you. And that is one of the first things I was thinking was like, we got to get this out. People need to know who Chad is. Let's jump on the podcast. And in addition to that, knowing we were, just coming from Fit for Service and things like that, wanting to share everything and also seeing the draw. A lot of people in Fit for Service are like, hey, when's that thing happening with you and Chad? What'd you guys learn when you went to Virginia? All these people are clued in on it. It's been a real pleasure of mine to be able to work with you side by side, and I'm really excited for this first run together where we get to sit and really dive deeply into everything that we've done here and how it's done in different places, and the educational piece that is going to take place for years to come, I think, is just an incredible thing. One of the ideas that you had was in certifying people. So you take these classes, whether it's a 3-day or a 5-day or a 1-day, and that checks off a credit hour on your certification. I think that's a really important piece because, you're not going to teach everything in 3 days. I mean, you're going to give them fucking a lot more than people can handle. You're going to give a lot in those 3 days. And everyone's going to leave satisfied, but at the same time, it's not your entire wealth of knowledge. Just as the same, if somebody comes to a Fit for Service event and they get the best of me, it's not going to be the entire wealth of my knowledge. But this is it's a cool thing. I like this.
It's the bigger community, which I see being connected, and I've had this vision for it where you're gaining a certification, but it's not just like a PDC, which I never got, and I understand a lot of that in there. But I think with this new practitioner certification, you can steer that in whatever direction you want to go, and then your experience comes out in your certification like you'd see at a university. Like you're good at, let's say it's earthworks or with animals, and you start to gain and create your own certification so it can be tailor-made to you, but you have these badges like in Boy Scouts. So you have a certification, and here's how it's defined. And I see this farm as like a nexus. You're kind of in the belly button of Texas. If you look at North and South America, and now these other farms we see developing, it becomes a larger community that can then be digitally woven together, where you see the different farms, what they look like, what they do, what they might be looking for, what they offer for different income streams to give other people ideas. Or you're like, we need a stonemason. Well, you look into that network and it's like, oh, here's a stonemason and he knows this and he knows that. And so you're connected in there. You could message each other, and maybe you're like, we want to know this, this, and this, or here's what we need. And these people pop up and you can look at it. And likewise, that person can say, I want to do this. Who else out there has a piece of land that's doing this? So it's going to bring that community together quicker and with more wisdom and insight. I see it coming, and I'm only one person, but that foundation's already starting. And with this certification, everything else you're doing here, creating that network of farms is already happening. And so tying that all together I see that as one of the forward escapes.
Yeah, absolutely, brother.
Into something more amazing.
Parallel system that improves upon on all aspects. Yeah, brother. Well, I'm stoked. We'll have you back out here March 31st through April 2nd. It's going to be awesome. I will link in the show notes where you can find that right now. But if you wanted to check over, your website is
kingdomcome.earth.
Kingdomcome.earth. We'll link there. From your website, we'll have the link to ours. It's going to be Gardeners of Eden, but I'm not sure that it's up yet. By the time this podcast runs, it will be up before our event starts. And I'll send our Instagram handle as well for that. I think it's the Gardeners of Eden or Gardens of Eden on Instagram. And from the Instagram, you can purchase tickets to that. So I know it's complicated in the first run, but this is our first run, and we want the website to be fucking nice, not just minimum viable product. So that's taking a bit more time, and that's okay. We're still going to get y'all out here. We're capping it at 40 people, so this thing should sell out quickly. And we just want to make sure that we have enough hands on deck so that everyone gets everything they've come for and then some. And we'll be doing this multiple times a year. So if you don't make it out for this one, just trust that you circle back to the Instagram page or our website. There's going to be many offerings throughout the year, and we're very excited to be doing this.
It's going to be exciting.
Hell yeah, brother. Thanks,
It already is.